All, welcome to one more show. This is Dr. Mubin Sayed, and guess who is with us? We have Dr. Paul Marik once again with us. Dr. Paul Marik, Dr. Marik, welcome.
Thank you, my hero, Dr. Mo, Dr. Mubin, or Dr. Mo, or Dr. Bean. I don't know what to call you. You are the
You can
king.
call me anything you like,
You're the king bean.
and you are the emperor. So
Yes.
I am so excited. I'm so glad that we have Dr. Paul Marik with us. And today's topic is very important as well, and that is intermittent fasting. Dr. Paul Marik and I have been discussing over the phone the intermittent fasting, and Paul has been talking about, hey, there are studies or there are folks, physicians who say that women and intermittent fasting, one has to be careful for their reproductive systems, physiology, and function. So we've been looking at various papers together, and I wanted to make sure that we can have that discussion with you as well. Before we go to those discussions, I want to quickly show the references here. So first of all, this is flccc.net site. So you can type flccc.net or covid19criticalcare.com, and you would come on to this page where you have, if you go to the top here, these are various treatment protocols. And today we're going to look at one of the protocol as well that Dr. Marik has updated for this intermittent fasting um, discussion that we are doing today as well. Here are some studies as a reference. And in the description of this video, there are links to these studies as well. I have these studies open separately here too, and we would go over some parts of them. And most importantly, the intermittent fasting and women is an important aspect. This document that you're seeing, this is the I Recover protocol that is also on flccc.net. So with this introduction, Dr. Marik, once again, welcome. So tell me this about the intermittent fasting and women. What is most important here in this topic?
Yeah. So thanks for inviting me, and thanks for talking about this. So it really is an important topic. So for a number of reasons. Firstly, we know now that autophagy or autophagy, whoever wants to say it, is probably the most powerful mechanism for improving cellular function, for prolonging lifespan, for improving overall health, for preventing disease, for preventing Parkinson's, for preventing Alzheimer's, for limiting diabetes, for treating metabolic disease. It is a powerful, truly powerful mechanism. And I don't think most people or physicians realize the importance of autophagy in overall health. It's truly, it's a gift of nature, because nature gave us a way to self-heal. It does truly remarkable things and likely prevents cancer. If you activate autophagy, it's going to reduce your risk of cancer, degenerative disease, promote health. And we've now figured out that autophagy is really important in the vaccine injured, because this is a way the cell can get rid of spike protein as well as all the other bad metabolic consequences. However, what we've discovered is that if you look at the demographics of vaccine injured, most of them, 80% are women, and most of them are between the ages of 20 and 50. So they're in women in the reproductive years. And so what we do is we put out a protocol and we get feedback. We're very open to feedback from clinicians, from patients, from practitioners, because, this is an open dialogue. This is an ongoing discussion. It's a process in evolution. And we heard from many women that women just don't tolerate intermittent fasting as well as do men. So obviously that becomes problematic, because I think intermittent fasting is probably the most important intervention for the vaccine injured woman and for women to maintain health. So the question then becomes, what are the true facts, and what can women do to do intermittent fasting in a safe and effective way? And so that's part of the discussion we've been having and part of the research that we've done.
Got
Um,
it.
so that's really the opening. And, we have discussed a few papers. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of science, and we need to follow the science. It's really important because people sprout forth all kinds of nonsense. And, we're not talking about Fauci's science. We're talking about true science, which is reproducible findings that make common sense. And because a lot of
Totally
people just
agree.
talk out of their rear end. They make statements that they can't support and back up. So it's really important to follow the science. And when you don't know, you have to be honest and say, you know what, we really don't know, but this is what we think or what we suggest, so that it opens the door to improvement. You have to be honest, you have to be sincere, and you have to follow the best science.
Absolutely. And Dr. Marik, if I can add this one comment here to this physiology and pathology of the spike protein stuck in the cells. So, one comment is that our immune system actually has no way of kind of figuratively put his hand inside a cell that has, let's say, spike or some virus or some bacteria and remove that trash out of it. There is no mechanism. So the only two mechanisms that are possible are, one, either the immune system cells, for example, natural killer or cytotoxic T cells or neutrophils, especially NK and cytotoxic T cells, they will come over, they will identify a cell that is sick, and then they would kill that cell, the whole cell. Or the other possible mechanism is that the cell itself, the one, imagine I'm a cell that has a spike protein in it. The cell itself, the stressor sensors recognize that there is a problem in me, and the cell decides to clean up the trash. Cell can actually trigger autophagy in the stressful state by itself as well. However, in case of spike protein, there is something really uh, sinister of the spike protein, if I can say that. And that is, spike protein's molecule tries to, or it has those little structures there that turn off many inflammatory pathways or stress pathways within the cell. So the cells is going to sit in there with the least defense offered, and now spike or the virus is just sitting and having fun in there and causing lots of problems. This is why I think it becomes really important to tap into the mechanism of autophagy, because that allows this trash to be removed. Does this make sense, Dr. Merrick?
Yeah. So what you say is really true. I mean, the spike is probably the most evil, toxic protein that we know. And what the spike does is it actually switches off, as you say, natural killer cells, cytotoxic T cells designed to kill it. So it's a way of self-preservation. And the spike is so devious that it's actually interfering with the host mechanism to get rid of it in terms of its own self-preservation. So, using those arms of the immune system, it's very difficult to get rid of spike. So the only way that we know, the predominant way, is to try and help the cell break down the spike through autophagy. And that's why we think it's such an important mechanism. And so, as we said, for reasons we'll talk about, it seems to be much easier for men to do. But, I think, this can be applied to women because it's really important, since they take the brunt of this disease and they need to, adapt the way they do intermittent fasting to activate autophagy, in a more physiologic way. And so, what we always speak about is physiology. We talk about physiology and pathology, because unless you understand physiology, you're not talking real medicine. So it has to be physiologically based. So I agree with you. So, you've
Totally makes sense.
outlined, very clearly in your shows how autophagy works. So basically, there are a number of phases and stages. It's a really complex molecular pathway with multiple genes. So there are at least 30 different autophagy genes and proteins. But, that's for another discussion. What we want to talk about is, how we can adapt this, to women. And I think, just to make it simple, I like, as we do, make it as simple as you can. I think that's what Einstein said. Make it as simple as you can, but not any simpler, so that people understand. And the way I look at it is mTOR. So mTOR, which is mammalian targeted rapamycin complex, is the metabolic switch in the cell. It is the metabolic switch. So it plays this very important in switching on and switching off autophagy. So I think, mTOR acts on ULK proteins and all other kinds of proteins. You don't need to know that. I think all you need to know is mTOR is the basic metabolic switch. And then the question is, how do you switch it on and off? So you want to switch it off, and that activates autophagy. What activates mTOR? It's quite simple. It's sugar, it's insulin, and it's protein. So those are the three molecules or compounds which switch on mTOR. So if you're eating, you switch off autophagy, particularly if you're eating carbohydrates. And we know that the Western diet, we eat all the time. We snack all the time, and we snack on foods that increase your glucose and your insulin. And then what it does effectively is switches off autophagy. So basically what you're saying is we need to follow a more natural diet where you have periods of fasting where you're not eating glucose, which stimulates insulin, and you're not eating protein, because those are the switches of mTOR. Interestingly enough, you can actually have fat, because fat doesn't directly act on mTOR. So, we've spoken about coffee. Coffee activates autophagy. So if you have coffee with a little bit of thick cream, it's actually a way of, having something to drink, as you're doing now, without interfering with autophagy. So what we're saying is that people need to reconsider the way they eat. I think slightly different in men and women, but you have to think about activating autophagy. It is the key. It is the single most important key to health, good living, longevity, and being disease-free. It's as simple as that. We have it within ourselves. It's cheap. You don't have to pay anybody to do it.
It actually saves money if you're eating lesser number of times. So then I have a question. Why, in case of women, there is more caution? And I want to quickly share your statement here as well in the iRecover protocol, that you say a number of studies have suggested that intermittent fasting may not be as beneficial for women as it is for men. So what is behind this, that women are not able to do a similar stretch of intermittent fasting as men?
Yeah, so obviously we don't know everything, it's evolving, but it seems that the hypothalamus pituitary ovarian axis, so that's the axis that controls ovarian function, the release of LH and FSH from the pituitary and the effect on ovaries, very much dependent on nutrition. So we know that women who actually starve themselves become amenorrheic. We know that women with anorexia who starve themselves become amenorrheic. So for reasons not entirely clear, the hormonal axis in women is very sensitive to nutrient supply. And so the experiments in rats. Now, obviously humans aren't rats, but you can do these experiments. And what they did was alternate day fasting. So alternate day fasting is a more aggressive form of intermittent fasting, which we don't recommend, because in women at least, because it's much more aggressive. So what they found in alternate day eating or alternate day fasting is that it decreased the secretion of growth hormone, FSH, LH, many of the ovarian hormones, and that these mice actually stopped menstruating, became infertile, and there was a decrease in ovarian size. So this was a study in mice, which does lead credence to this concept. But I must add that this is a more aggressive form of intermittent fasting, which we don't recommend. Then there was a study in humans in which they again did alternate day fasting. So alternate day fasting is a more aggressive form of fasting. And they compared men versus women. And again, in men, it actually had a beneficial effect in terms of glucose and insulin resistance. In women, the glucose went up and it didn't improve insulin resistance. So I think this allows us, this provides the scientific basis for us to rethink what we recommend in women. So maybe you could show your graphic. So I think the bottom line is it's important to do in women that, I don't think you can say women shouldn't do this, but I think you have to adapt the protocol to women, and you need to go slow and you need to be cautious, particularly in menstruating women. So, in men, you can be more aggressive. So what we recommend in women is to start off with a 12-hour fast. So that's pretty easy to do. So basically, you don't eat for 12 hours, and you can work out which window works best for you. During that 12 hours, you can drink fluid, you can drink coffee, but please don't drink juices. Juices are really bad, or sodas. So you fast for 12 hours, and it's best that you don't eat for about 4 to 6 hours before going to sleep, because as we've discussed before, activating autophagy while you're sleeping is a very, very, very important process, because it helps regenerate your neurons while you're sleeping. And that if you eat before you go to sleep, it prevents autophagy happening at night. And autophagy is very important for regeneration of neurons. So what would we say in women is, start off slowly, do it for 3 non-consecutive days a week, like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and do it for 12 hours. And what's really important is that it's intermittent fasting coupled with real food. So what I mean is eat food, not processed food. So you want to make sure it's a healthy, wholesome diet, real food. What we would prefer most is a low carbohydrate fat diet. So something which generates ketones. So ketosis is actually really good. It activates autophagy. It does a lot of really good things. It improves insulin resistance. So, and you can do this slowly. So you can gradually increase the hours and gradually decrease the carbs. But you certainly want to avoid high carbohydrate processed foods. So, donuts, bagels, chips, chocolates, these are toxic. These are toxins. People talk about cyanide and all kind of DDT as being toxic. In Robert Lustig's book, he makes it quite clear that carbohydrates are toxins. And so what you need to do is reduce these processed foods that are toxic. So in the 12-hour period that you eat, you want to eat real healthy foods, which, if it looks like a food, it's food. If it comes in a box and has a label, it's not food. So you want to eat real food and try and decrease your intake of carbs. And this whole scam, it is a sham of, low sugar is low fat. This low fat is a complete scam, because we know saturated fats and cholesterol are perfectly fine. It's a fraud perpetuated by the food industry. So you want to avoid things which say low fat, because if it's low in fat, it's high in sugar. So the key is avoid carbohydrates, avoid processed sugar, avoid processed seed oil, um, eat for 12 hours and fast for 12 hours and eat wholesome food. And I think that's a very good starting point. It does a really,
Agreed.
that itself, I think, is a very good starting point. And then, if you want to be a little bit more fancy, and you can take a number of nutraceuticals which activate autophagy. So, what we're talking about in the 12-hour fast period is you activating autophagy. And so, to supercharge autophagy, there are compounds which help the body to activate autophagy. We know coffee is one, we know spermidine is another one, we know resveratrol is another one. So if you took a spermidine while you were fasting, it may supercharge autophagy. The worst thing to do is to have a carbohydrate snack, because that's completely switches off. It acts on the mTOR switch. It completely switches off autophagy. So that's why the snacking business is so bad. So it's just a matter of getting into the habit, thinking about things differently. It's not a difficult thing to do. And people find that once they actually start such a pattern, it increases their energy. They feel better. Their mentation is better. Their cognition is better. Their life is better. So, why would you not want to do something which makes you feel better and makes you healthier? And then, of course, the other thing is a little bit of exercise. We know that exercise activates autophagy. So when you in your fasting period, you want to go for a walk or do a little bit of exercise. And so you're now boosting, you're supercharging the autophagy process. So I think people have to think about autophagy. Stop counting calories. Calorie counting is a stupid exercise. It serves no purpose. So I think people need to think about autophagy as a way of saving their life. And then as you've showed,
Absolutely.
once they've got this initial program, under control, and they find that they can tolerate it, it doesn't affect with their menses, then what they can do is they can experiment a little bit by increasing the numbers of fasting days and increasing the window and basically seeing what happens. And, if they tolerate it fine, that's cool. If they find that it's causing menstrual irregularities, then go back to where you were before. So, every patient is different. Every patient is different. There's no single recipe. So patients have to figure out what works best for them. So, we're presenting a guidebook to help them get started. So that's what we recommend. And I think, the data now shows that autophagy is singly the most important mechanism for promoting health and well-being.
Got it. Excellent. Thank you. And talking about the exercise, I believe that when, as you said, light exercise, if you take the exercise and think I am within the autophagy window and let me just go do something really hard to kind of boost the effect, that can actually have a negative effect by reducing the nutrients very fast, by taking the energy away and causing stress hormones to be released. That will in turn stop the autophagy and such mechanisms. So light exercise that allows stress on the cell, which, or stress meaning the cell's shape changes. For example, when you are doing curls, your biceps muscles are changing shape. Those shape changes of the cells also cause autophagy to occur. You don't have to be rigorous about it. You don't have to be hard on the cells. Does this make sense as well, Dr. Marik?
Yeah, I think we should do what nature made us to do. So I think walking actually is an outstanding form of exercise, particularly if you can do it outside. Obviously in winter it's a little bit challenging, but people like you who live in California or Florida or somewhere nice weather, just go out for a walk in the sun. It has enormous physiological benefits, both in terms of the sun and in terms of mobility and in terms of walking. There's good data that show that people just walk have a much lower risk of developing Alzheimer's disease and degenerative disease. So walking is, what we've been designed to do. I don't think the human was designed to go to a gym and push 300 pounds of weight. That's not what we were designed to do. We were designed to walk and be mobile. And, that's what we should do. Stretching exercises is really good, doing flexibility exercises. But I think pushing heavy weights, some resistance training is fine, but you don't want to overdo it.
So this is the primary message for today, that when women are doing intermittent fasting, especially those in the reproductive age, they should be careful and have a structure and keep watching for their physiological functions, and then decide how to move it. Uh, Dr. Marik, thank you very much for this. Would you be open for some more minutes of questions from the cool beans?
Yeah, sure. But before we do that, maybe we should get to another concept of fasting in women. So there are some practitioners who suggest that you should cycle the intermittent fasting according to the days of your menstrual cycle. So this seems to be popular out there. Unfortunately, there's no data to support it. So, what I'm saying is it's something to consider, but we don't have data. So that, it is what it is. And, hopefully people will study this. So there are some practitioners who suggest that in the, first 14 days of the menstrual cycle, that it's okay for women to do intermittent fasting, pretty vigorously. And then from day 10 to day 15 or 16 to slow down a bit. And then in the last, progesterone phase, not to fast at all. So, we can find no data to support such a program or protocol. But I think if women want to try it, I think that's fine. And obviously we would appreciate any kind of feedback. So it is an alternative way to approach this problem, because I think intermittent fasting is really important in women, particularly in those who vaccine injured. And so what we need to do is develop protocols that work best for women. And I would suspect that it's very individualized. What works for some women doesn't work for all women. So I think that, like much in life, you have to figure out what works best for you. And so this is something to consider. I just think the bottom line is that intermittent fasting is really important. It's important for women, and they have to maybe go slower, be a little bit more reserved, be more thoughtful, and just see what works best for them.
Totally makes sense. Thank you very much for this as well. So I have a few questions here. One question is very interesting. Um, that is from one who has no name, and he is saying, or she is saying, that I do not wake up. How do I not? So the question that there is 16 hours, and at 14th hour the autophagy starts when we are sleeping. So the brain has to have that kind of interval before it triggers autophagy. So they're saying, well, if I woke up in the middle of the night for peeing, would that stop that countdown?
Yeah, so I mean, if you have to pee, you have to pee. I don't think anybody is saying don't pee. So most people can actually go through the night without having to pee. But if you're a man and you have prosthetic issues, there's no reason to get up in the night and pee. Peeing doesn't interfere with autophagy. So I mean, if you have to wake up to go to pee, that's fine. It's not going to break autophagy. You don't want to pee and eat at the same time. So while you're peeing, you don't want to have a drink or have a shake. So if you have to pee, that's fine. People have to pee. So just pee,
Also,
go back to sleep. But most people should be able to sleep the night without peeing, unless it's a man with prosthetic women, or maybe women have some kind of urological issue.
makes sense. And as Dr. Marik said, when you got up for peeing and you come back, you go back to sleep. And during this little interval, don't open up your phone and look for various things which awakens your brain or reticular activating system a lot, which would then cause the cells to become awakened as well. So just let that sort of a sleep state to continue, and you're going to be fine. There is a question from Lisu. I think that is a question for me, that there are two chats going on. So I have been broadcasting it on four channels together, Lisu. One is Dr. Bean YouTube, the other one is Cafe Live, and then two Facebook channels as well. So because it is broadcasting at four channels, there are multiple chats. All are valid. Dr. Marik is just such a celebrity that I decided that will broadcast everywhere. So here is a question. Gina says, intermittent fasting can cause electrolyte imbalance and arrhythmias. What's the best way to supplement?
Yeah, so you know what, we're not recommending. It's important to drink fluids when you fast. So, it's not like complete starvation. So we would recommend during fasting to drink fluids. If you need, but you don't want to drink juices. Fruit juices are probably the worst thing on the planet because they are a pure concentration of glucose and fructose and cause a massive fructose glucose spike. So they're probably the worst things to drink. So what you can drink is, there are, sports solutions that have multiple electrolytes. There are multiple products at the grocery store that have water with electrolytes. So if you're someone who loses a lot of fluid through sweating or through other means, and you feel that maybe you're getting muscle cramps, then get a solution non-sweetened with electrolytes. The other thing is magnesium. So magnesium is really important for cell function. It's important for activating autophagy. It's very important for making ATP. So many Americans are actually magnesium deficient. So it may be worthwhile as part of your protocol to supplement. You're taking spermidine. I would say maybe take magnesium, but you have to be careful which magnesium, because the so-called super-powered magnesium you get over the counter is magnesium oxide, which is not absorbed. Okay, so you have to be careful. So the magnesium oxide is not absorbed. So you have to buy one of the magnesium citrate or acetate or hyaluronase, or there are a whole bunch of, we have it listed on our protocol, which magnesium preparations to take. So it does become important. And I think many people are magnesium deficient. Magnesium, very important for making cellular energy. It's important for autophagy. So it may make sense to supplement with a high quality non-magnesium oxide solution supplement. Would you agree, Dr. Bean?
Totally agree. And I agree with this as well, that we have a lot of magnesium deficiency related problems that even physicians continue to try to solve in other ways. So magnesium should be kept an eye on.
Yeah. There's also really good data that just magnesium supplementation on its own is really good for treating type 2 diabetes, for treating hypertension. So it has really important metabolic effects. And many Americans, for reasons which we maybe don't understand, are magnesium deficient. And so just buy a readily over-the-counter, you don't want to buy the magnesium salt. You want to buy a magnesium, reasonable preparation that's well absorbed. And that should go a long way in restoring magnesium levels. And then, of course, vitamin D. You can't forget vitamin D, particularly as we go into winter. People aren't being exposed to enough sun. So I think that we should all be taking some vitamin D in the winter. So we're talking about magnesium and vitamin D. And maybe women take spermidine to help them activate autophagy. You don't want to land up taking, 20 or 30 supplements, which may have questionable benefit.
Makes sense. So Casey says, what about benefits for those who are either menopausal due to age or surgery?
Yeah, so that's an easier question. So menopausal women or who have lost their periods for whatever reason don't really need to worry about this because they shouldn't be concerned about menstruation. So intermittent fasting in postmenopausal women is fine. They're obviously not that concerned about their menstrual cycle. Would you agree, Dr. Bean?
I completely agree that it's really about the reproductive function and the lack of nutrition impacting the hypophyseal gonadal axis. So if that is not a worry, then intermittent fasting can be done. Augie says, any full recoveries of long COVID?
Yeah, so I'm not sure the question, but it's a good question. So we know that many people with long COVID actually do get better. Unlike the vaccine injured, in which the spike protein disease can persist for months, if years, if not forever, many patients with long COVID actually do get better. So, it's not hopeless, but, obviously they have to follow long COVID is due to persistence of spike protein. And so they have to follow whatever they can to treat the complications of spike protein. Essentially, long COVID, the vaccine injured are suffering from the consequences of spike. Unfortunately, with the vaccine injury, they have such a high quantity of spike, it becomes more difficult. But generally, we find patients with long COVID do improve. They should look at our protocol on FLCCC on how to deal with long COVID, but more importantly, vaccine injured, just to give them some ideas. And this is a treatable disease, and patients should improve. Unfortunately, most doctors are completely clueless. Well, not complete; they're totally clueless. They don't understand spike-related disease. They will dismiss patients. They don't know how to treat it, and it's one of the travesties of the medical situation we're in.
Got it. Thank you very much. And once again, just like we have Blues Lover saying that with FLCCC protocol, I'm 80% better. I also had a vaccine injured patient. I do not know, I can call them long COVID, but vaccine injured patient who is now, I would say, 99% better. So, Augie, I think recovery back towards a normal functional life is possible. Everybody is kind of moving towards that in a different pace. And you are correct, there are folks who may not recover as fast and as much. I think there still is hope for all of them.
Yeah. So the thing I need to say though, if you have long COVID or you're vaccine injured, there are two really important things. Avoid the vaccine. I mean, it is probably the worst possible thing to do. And there is this misconception that people perpetuate that people with long COVID should be vaccinated. It's possibly the single worst thing to do to them. And the other is that if you have long COVID or vaccine injured and you get a flu-like illness, you want to treat yourself early, particularly if it's COVID, because we know the more spike you have, the worse the disease. So the problem now is that we have a lot of influenza and RSV, and it becomes difficult to distinguish. So, just this last week, we put together a protocol for the treatment of influenza, stroke RSV, stroke COVID, so that people can be proactive. And, these are cheap, readily available medications. By the way, Tamiflu doesn't work. It's a complete and utter fraud. It's one of the biggest frauds perpetuated by Big Pharma and the agencies. The federal government has stockpiled millions of dollars of Tamiflu. It's a drug which doesn't work. And in fact, it's a drug which may promote the spread of influenza because it doesn't have any viral properties. It probably acts as an antipyretic, decreasing temperature. So it is a complete and utter hoax. So don't get Tamiflu. There are a lot of things that you can do. So, people need to be empowered to take control of their own health. You unfortunately cannot believe a single thing the health authorities tell you. They are lying, they are fraudulent, they are deceptive. So,
And
if you have long COVID, you don't want to get COVID or flu. You want to be as healthy as you can.
makes sense. So two questions I'm gonna collate in one. So Myron Burney says D3 plus red light plus near infrared, and I'm gonna add one more question to this. Fifth Gen Texan says K2 as well. So with vitamin D, D3, is the red light and infrared light and K2 important additions, or they all are separately important?
Yeah, so I'll give my answer. Then I wanted to see what you think. So I think infrared as an adjunct is really important. We're beginning to understand the curative powers of the sun. It's not by accident the sun is out there in the sky, and that our forefathers would walk in the sun and be exposed to sun. And it's not just making vitamin D. The near infrared has remarkable restorative properties in terms of healing, uh, interfering with inflammation, uh, activating ATP and making energy. I mean, you did a really excellent show showing how near infrared switches off toll receptors and inflammation. So the sun in infrared is a potent treatment modality. The sun is more powerful than your physician. So I think it's part of the, depending on how you want to fashion your lifestyle. I bought a near infrared lamp, which I use whenever I can, just because I think it's such a potent therapy. So, obviously I live in the north, it's cold, you can't go in the sun. But certainly the sun is, we know this has remarkable curative powers. And then the question of K2 and magnesium. So the current recommendation is if you're taking like more than 5,000 or 6,000 units of vitamin D, then you should take K2 and magnesium. And we do include that in our most recent protocol. So those are good questions.
Absolutely. So you are absolutely correct that when vitamin D is taken, it causes calcium's mobilization. So within our body has a mathematical calculator, and it needs a level which is calcium multiplied with phosphate. And to keep that available, it can mobilize calcium from one place and deposit calcium in another place. And so it is important to have K2, because K2 is a partner of vitamin D, to make sure calcium goes and deposits in the correct places instead of, let's say, under blood vessels or making them thick as well. So, yes, K2. Some studies have said keep K2 and magnesium separate from each other because they can interfere with each other's absorption. I haven't really seen a study that depicts that correctly, but because of this, sometimes I tell folks who I know or I work with to separate out K2, let's say in the morning, and then magnesium in the lunchtime, and that is how you can avoid it if there is a such a reaction.
Yeah. So one thing is that things can get a little bit out of hand with all these supplements, and you don't want patients to be taking 15 or 20 different supplements. I think it becomes complicated, it gets confusing, it gets expensive. So I think there are a few that are really important. Vitamin D, if you're taking high dose vitamin D, add K2. You want to take magnesium. And I think if you're a woman, you want to maybe take spermidine to help your autophagy. And basically, that's the list. You may want to take vitamin C because it's good for your immune system. But, I would resist a list of 15 or 20 supplements because things can get out of hand. I did see a question pop up there about saunas. So saunas are yes. I mean, the data is overwhelming. So we know that people in Finland who have traditional saunas are much healthier than people in the rest of the world. And their risk of cardiovascular disease, their risk of early death, their risk of depression. There was a fascinating study that looked at one session of sauna in patients with severe depression and showed that it improved their depression for 6 weeks after the session. So sauna is astonishing. But if you combine sauna with infrared, so it's an infrared sauna, that's potent. So you're getting the benefits of thermal therapy with the benefits of infrared, and that's truly potent. Unfortunately, many of the saunas are far infrared. So the far infrared provide the heat. The far infrared doesn't actually penetrate very deep into the tissue, so it doesn't have the benefits in terms of mitochondrial function and inflammation that near infrared. But we do know patients who benefit from sauna. So you can get a sauna with far infrared, but it doesn't have the benefits of near infrared. I think the optimal is a sauna with near infrared.
Awesome. So you already answered Lisbeth's question as well. She was asking about far infrared and not near. So there is a mitochondrial rehabilitation. And to the listeners here, please do me a favor. From the FLCCC platform, we have been talking about long COVID, vaccine injury, and various interventions as we're discussing now. So if you just Google in YouTube, long story short with Dr. Bean, all of these videos that Dr. Marik just mentioned, and this video will go there as well, these are listed there. So just watch some of these near infrared, far infrared discussions. I think you'll enjoy them. Plus, these will be beneficial. Uh, Another question here is a little bit before for the coffee. Is tea an okay substitute for coffee?
Yeah, yeah, I think it is. Green tea, particularly, as has EEKG or whatever it's called, which is a flavonoid, which is particularly helpful. Yeah, I think tea is also fine. You depend. So if you're a tea drinker, have tea instead of coffee, because most of us like to get up in the morning and have some hot beverage. Tea is fine. Coffee is fine. What you want to avoid is a beverage which is high in glucose, because it's the glucose which switches off mTOR. So you really need to think about this metabolic switch. It's truly astonishing. The body has a switch, just like a light switch. It's called mTOR. And so you want to keep the switch off. And the way you switch on the switch is glucose, which then causes insulin and protein. So you want to keep the switch off to activate autophagy. Sauna, then cold shower, yeah. So there are many people who will, it's called, thermal therapy. You sauna, then have a cold shower, which I think is fine. You just have to be careful about people who have cardiovascular disease. You don't want to overstress their cardiovascular system. And again, with sauna, if you're not acclimatized to it, you want to do it slowly, build it up slowly. And then many people will have a cold shower afterwards, and it seems fine. But you just have to be careful that you don't shock the system too quickly. So it's acclimatization.
So Kelly says, should those with high LDL worry about saturated fat in coffee during intermittent fasting?
So Kelly asked a really good question. So this is one of the biggest scams known to medicine. It is a scam. It's a scam of corruption perpetuated by the statin industry. It's a complete scam. Don't measure your HDL and don't worry about your HDL. Unless you're unfortunate to have a familial hypercholesterolemia, I think people should not obsess about it. There's data that shows that men with the highest the highest LDL have the best survival. The body makes cholesterol for a really good reason. For a good reason, it's not by accident. We need cholesterol for cell function. The brain has a really high concentration of cholesterol, LDL. And data shows if you reduce LDL, which is going to come out of the brain, you decrease cerebral cognitive function. So unless your LDL is off the roof, I would not worry about it. So what's more important is your triglycerides. So it's really your triglyceride HDL ratio. And high triglycerides go together with insulin resistance. It's part of the metabolic syndrome. So really the best indicator is your triglyceride HDL ratio. And if your triglycerides are high, it means you have metabolic syndrome, you likely have insulin resistance, and you need to do intermittent fasting and a low carbohydrate diet. Um,
Got it.
is
Sorry.
medium chain triglyceride oil? Yeah, perfect. So medium chain triglycerides, such as coconut oil, actually are metabolized differently and perfectly fine. So MCT oil in coffee is absolutely perfect.
Absolutely. And I have seen personally the day, it is such a interesting thing that the effect can be observed the same day. The day I put MCT oil in my coffee in the morning, I know I'm more sharp. Maybe this is psychological, but I think there is some physiological effect as well. And the way I forget it, I forget words or things, and then I say, oh, I forgot my MCT oil. So it is such a beautiful thing. At least this is one anecdote for you. I use both coconut oil and MCT oil. So one last question. Um, Eric says, infrared quartz heaters, would these be useful? I guess the whole question is.
Yeah, so there are a whole bunch of LED devices that are mainly far infrared. So there are LED devices that emit red. Some of them are near infrared. Some of them are heaters. So, what I would suggest is devices that are near infrared. There are specific um, products that are incandescent lights that have a spectrum very similar to the sun. So their electromagnetic profile is similar to the sun. So with high levels of near and mid infrared, lower far infrared, and no ultraviolet. So in a way, these lights actually provide the benefit of sunshine without the potential detriment of ultraviolet light. So I'm not sure about infrared quartz heaters. I suppose they are okay. You need to look at their specifications. There are LED devices that have red and near infrared. The problem, though, with these devices is the the wavelength spectrum is very narrow. So, if you compare it, it's a very narrow spectrum of red and near infrared, which compares to the sun, which is, quite extensive, as well as some of these infrared devices, which have a broader spectrum of infrared radiation.
So with this, there are still tons of questions. I think we just all love you so much. And what I've observed is people love you and respect you and trust you. And then they would like to hear things from your mouth so that it becomes more verified for them. So thank you very much for all the hard work you've done. Last 3 years, while, as I say, no good deed goes unpunished, while going through the stresses of being able to speak these words and help the humanity, you are still in there fighting and working. I was looking at your protocols, and it blows my mind that you are spending so much time updating, reading studies, looking at papers, inferring, interpreting, and using that to update those protocols. And then they're available for free out there. Thank you so much for your help, and thank you so much for being here.
So thank you. I want to thank you because you're an inspiration. And I want to thank the Cool Beans because, if it wasn't for the Cool Beans, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing. I think one has to have an open mind. It doesn't mean you let your brains fall out completely. You have to have an open mind and just think about stuff and just recognize that you can't trust what the authorities are telling you. They have a vested interest. They want to make money. They are not interested in your health. So I think, people have to recognize that they have the power to determine their destiny and their health. The NIH and CDC and FDA are certainly not interested in your health. So you have to take it in your own hands, and you need to, you know, read, explore reputable sites, and then of course you need to listen to every single thing Dr. Mobeen says, because he's the source of all truth.
Thank you so much. Uh, I started following Dr. Marik's work, and in the very beginning of the pandemic, the Math Plus protocol is what I was able to somehow find and present that to Cool Beans, and that provided us that island on which we could gather and know there is hope and how to save ourselves. Otherwise, the basic message that was coming in was just stay home, and if you become unlucky to end up in a hospital and die, then that would be it. We'll ventilate you, but otherwise this is it. And your work is the one that actually helped me put something out in front of Cool Beans to help us all. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And great health to everybody. And please
Yeah.
do what you can to, you know,
Yes. So
to eat well, and live happily.
thank you very much, Dr. Marik. Thank you for your time. Cool Beans, thank you very much for your time as well. This video is already on 4 channels at this time. It will also become available on FLCCC's Long Story Short after editing, maybe in another week or so. Please make sure you like it, subscribe it, and share with others, especially women who are in reproductive age and are also suffering with vaccine injury or long COVID or even other chronic diseases. This will be very useful for them. Dr. Marik, once again, thank you very much and goodbye, everyone.
Thanks.